Right, to Russia now, where the country goes to the polls today as the first day of voting takes place for the presidential elections. But there is little doubt who the winner is going to be.
Vladimir Putin's expected to secure another 6 years in office, having already been in power longer than any ruler since Stalin.
Anne Simmons is the Moscow bureau chief for the Wall Street Journal, and she joins us now. And it's fair to say that this election is a sham, basically, right? Putin's going to win.
There's no doubt that Vladimir Putin is going to win this election. It's a done deal. It's really an election to legitimize Putin's political authority. Putin wants to show the world that Russians want him in power. And essentially, a vote for Vladimir Putin is a vote for his policies, and in particular, his war in Ukraine.
I think what you've just said there about Putin wants to tell the world that Russians want Putin in power. What do we know of what the Russian population actually want?
It's really difficult to know because the level of repression in Russia today is extreme. People are not allowed to voice their true opinions, to come out on the street, to show any kind of dissent. But having said that, there are polls, and again, you've got to take them with a pinch of salt because people are afraid to speak against the government. But the polls do show that Vladimir Putin has quite a large popularity rating. He has quite a large level of support. But again, that's because we only see this through one particular lens, and that is through state media.
Well, what happens if there's a low turnout? How's that going to affect Putin?
It's not going to be good in terms of the Kremlin's thinking. Vladimir Putin really wants to see a high turnout. In 2018, the last time we had presidential elections in Russia, there was a 67.5% turnout. Now, the Kremlin has made clear it wants it to be higher than that. It wants to show, Putin in fact came out just prior to the elections and said this week that Russians should go to the polls and vote in order to show their patriotism, as well as exercising their civic duty. Now, a low turnout is going to be a political statement. It will show that people just aren't engaged in this political process because they already know the outcome. And they do not want to be seen as endorsing the president of Russia at this stage.
Putin's had sort of 24 years to create, very carefully, this guise of democracy that gets sort of portrayed to the external world. And we know, we've sort of already discussed exactly what is at play. Where does this leave anyone who wants to be a credible voice of opposition to Putin? What options are even available to them if they're in the country?
Oh, very few options today. There were two anti-war candidates, Boris Nadezhdin and Ekaterina Duntsova. They were both anti-war candidates, they at least would-be candidates. They wanted to get on the ballot. Russia's Electoral Commission basically said that their paperwork was faulty, they violated the rules, so they were not put on the ballot. But they got a tremendous number of signatures, the 100,000 signatures necessary to even get on the ballot. And they took their concerns, their appeal, basically their complaint, to the Supreme Court of Russia, which basically sided with the Electoral Commission and said, no, you are not eligible to run in this race. So it's really, really difficult to challenge Vladimir Putin. The government controls the polling stations, of course, the digital polling, the digital voting process. Everywhere is under state control. So it's very, very difficult to go against that.
So whether Russia come out and they say we've had extremely high turnout or whether it's been a low turnout, how reliable are those polling figures?
They're not completely reliable. Analysts have said that it's going to be almost impossible to trust the polling figures because there is no doubt they might be manipulated by the Kremlin in order to ensure that it looks as though Putin, the incumbent, the president of Russia, is someone that the people of Russia want in power for another 6 years. If he does win, and it is widely expected that he will win, this will mean that Vladimir Putin will be in power for as long as dictator Joseph Stalin, so the longest leader since that period. And the Russian government, the Kremlin, they really feel that that's the message they want to send to the world. that this man is going nowhere, this man is in control, and the Russian people want him there.
Anne, thank you so much. The Moscow bureau chief of the Wall Street Journal. Really appreciate your time. The elections start today. They go on for 2 more days. So by Monday, we may have an idea about what kind of that turnout looks like, the kind of PR, propaganda spin that the rest of the world gets on what's been happening.